What's the most denial you've ever seen someone in? A guy I know is an EMT. Gets to the scene of a terrible accident. The people in the cars are told not to move until an EMT can evaluate them. One of the drivers becomes irate and gets out of his car arguing that he is fine and his place is to be. The EMTs explain that he might be suffering from shock and the adrenaline is masking any pain he might have from serious injuries and to please wait for an evaluation. He continues to argue. Then he turns around to go back to his car. While turning around, he turns his neck, snaps his spine, and drops dead. My wife went to college with someone who had Rachel Delozal, except that instead of pretending to be black, he pretended to be Native American. He went all in, insisting that people call him by his tribal name. His dorm was completely decorated in a Native American style, and he tried to dress the part too. He was very similarly discovered to be making it all up and ended up dropping out of college. Some people want so badly to be different and special. Once at my store, a woman asked for a book on Cherokee mysticism or something and proudly told me she was 136 Cherokee. Lady, at this point, you're white. And have you noticed that everyone had an Indian princess for a great-great-grandmother? Never a regular Indian woman. Always a princess. A girl I was friends with in high school denied being pregnant for her entire pregnancy. Even after she had the baby, she posted to Facebook saying she received the biggest surprise of her life. She was a thin girl. She was noticeably pregnant. Another friend and I confronted her about it, telling her she needed to go to the doctor, that what she was doing wasn't healthy for her or the baby. She was doing things that a pregnant woman should not be doing. She refused to acknowledge it, saying she was just getting fat. Luckily, the baby was completely healthy, but we are no longer friends because of that situation. When I was young, one of my friends died by doing a belly flop off a high ledge into a lake. It ruptured his aorta from what I recall. He was 17. He had a younger brother who was completely destroyed by his death. We lived in a very, very small and rural community, and everyone knew everyone else, so people sort of gathered around him to help him cope. He returned to school pretty quickly after his brother's funeral, and I remember hearing him talk about how his brother used to climb trees with him. And he'd correct himself immediately. He will climb trees with me this summer. That went on for months. Nobody knew what to do, so we all just sort of smiled and nodded along when he talked like that. Sad face. In the mirror. As a 22-year-old headed to vet school, I was dating an abusive pathological liar who had borrowed for K if my student loan money. Every member of my family and close friends hated him. He lied about literally everything. I kept convincing myself he was damaged by his early life in foster care and was a good person underneath. With enough love and support, he'd turn his life around. Instead, he destroyed my self-esteem and faith in others, cheated, took every available dime, and almost cost me my education and friends. Thank God I got away from him in time and didn't end up pregnant or hurt/killed. Whenever I think about that time, I am amazed anyone stuck by me through that shitstorm and my hardcore denial of who he was. I'm a lawyer. I represented a woman who was sued for wrongful death by the family of a passenger killed in the other car. The other car was driven by the deceased woman's brother. The deceased woman's brother was actually the one at fault for the accident, but the family could not accept that. The state police concluded, after performing an accident reconstruction, that the brother was at fault, and there were independent witnesses who stated that the brother was at fault. No matter how much evidence against him there was, the family could not accept it. I left the firm before the conclusion of the case, so I don't know how it panned out. I am probably too late to this thread, but my mother has something wrong with her. If you point out literally anything in a tone she thinks is judgmental, she denies it like her life depends on it. She drinks a bottle of wine 4 to 5 days a week and always claims when anyone asks her about alcohol that she hasn't drank in months. But the scary part is she actually believes that she could have alcohol in her system, and I'm 99% confident she would pass a lie detector test saying she hasn't drank because she truly believes it. She changes so many stories and adds events that never happened to either make herself seem like a hero or a victim, but literally believes that it happened. So I'm not sure what her deal is, but my mother stays in a constant denial of real life. Not particularly bad or anything, but a few years back I was at a mountain resort with my friend and his family, and our rental house had a pretty big backyard. Anyway, one day we were playing football and he threw it too high and it got stuck in a tree, and when he went to climb it he got his leg stuck and his dad had to come cut the branch off to free his leg. To this day he insists that it was me and not him. My mother-in-law's deadbeat boyfriend told her he was a decorated war hero. We checked his army records and it said he attended basic training, and that was it. We told her that meant he didn't go any further and his stories were a lie. And she told us no. This proves that he went into secret sniper training like he said. I have a friend who started going bald in his early 20s. Kept his hair long, and it's black and curly. The baldness started from the front and worked its way back. He refused to cut his hair, so he was balding on top with long curls in the back. He looked like a creeper, but refused to cut it. Eventually, he gave in and shaved it, and he looks way better now, but for a long time, there was some serious denial there. My best friend sent me this text this weekend. On the train next to a very large woman with her even larger child. She is loudly talking on her phone. No, that doctor told me I have to lose weight, but he's a dumbass. I'm just like this. Everyone in my family is just like this. Her kid has been eating handfuls of cookies, and I just watched her pull out 2 takeout bags of fried chicken with giant sodas. I've never seen this level denial. I've seen too many hospital dramas to not say something here. She'll be in the hospital for a dangerous brain surgery, but insists that they not start until she can say goodbye to her boyfriend. All her friends say they never met him, and he sounds too good to be true. The doctors will convince her that he isn't real and that he must be a product of her brain tumor. No, sobs, he is real, sobs. He felt so real. Sniffle, oh my god, he isn't real, bawling. When she's in the or her boyfriend will show up with flowers and apologize for being so late. She dies on the table. Kid, it's roll. Daytime Emmys for the whole crew. I don't want to say that all homeschooling parents are like that, but I had a very similar experience. My entire education from ages 10 to 18 was self-study, no help whatsoever. Neither parent was college educated. I was isolated and barely allowed to socialize. I ended up getting into a good college by studying my ass off of the SATs, and my social skills eventually caught up, but that doesn't mean I wasn't a victim of educational neglect. Naturally, since everything turned out fine, my parents loved to think they did the right thing. I think part of this might be doctors' faults from childhood. My husband and I are very fit, and our kids are all thin. The pediatrician always says they are so low on their weight percentile because of genetics, because their parents are thin too. But in actuality, my kids are super active like their parents and eat mostly vegetables, which are very filling with low calories. They also eat meat and dairy, but 50% of their diet is vegetables and a little fruit. And the grains they eat are whole, which keeps them fuller longer. There was a girl in college that was truly like this. She was very overweight. At first, like most women that say stuff like this, I thought she was lying. But she ate the smallest portions of anyone in the dining hall every time. I asked her roommate, and she said she never binge eats, but eats like that all the time and actually goes to the gym and the doctor every week for this problem. Her dad was a professor and told us the whole story one day at lunch in the dining hall. She had some gland issue that she was medicated for and seen every week that caused severe weight gain. He actually teared up at how difficult it was for her and how judgmental people could be. I have a friend who is almost 30 that thinks he is always on the cusp of finally getting ahead and won't have to live on the fringe of getting half his possessions repossessed. The guy makes 90 to 100K a year. He blames his financial woes on everything from Obamacare to the Saudis. The real reason is that anytime he has any extra money left over for that month, he doesn't just go out and buy something, he takes out a loan to buy something big. Every year, he gets a new expensive hobby that requires a lot of equipment. I used to think he would learn eventually, but he just keeps taking out new 20% loans. I've stopped bringing it up because it always turns into some weird, borderline incoherent rant against whatever he happened to see in the news that day that is somehow causing his financial problems. My dad has worked hard all his life and has degenerative disc disease, which is where your vertebrae begin to, well, degenerate until there's nothing left. He believes with all his heart that he's going to win the lottery and live his life in leisure for the remainder of his days. Every night, he buys a lottery ticket, and every morning when he checks what numbers were drawn, he says something to the effect of, "God damn it," as if he had actually believed he was going to win that night. I'm glad that at such a young age I've been around so many people who hold delusions. I hope I'll be better prepared to protect myself from them as a result. Yes, I forgot to mention my dad's lottery tickets as well. He plays $5 per drawing, twice per week, and has played the same numbers for as long as I can remember. He still believes that one of these days his numbers will hit, and it will be smooth sailing from here on out. I think if he ever actually wins, he'll have a heart attack and die. This actually doesn't seem uncommon for people in their 20s and 30s. There's a disconnect between their short-term financial and career decision-making and what they think their long-term situation will be. Step 1. Just try to keep your head above water. Step 2. Keep doing what you're doing. Step 3. Settle down, buy a house, retire, whatever. It can be mind-boggling to see this mentality in action. My young cousin very obviously has Asperger's, but my aunt and uncle insist that he's simply gifted. Don't get me wrong, he's a brilliant and sweet kid, but there's clearly something bigger going on there, and denying that keeps him from getting the extra help he needs. They're really doing their child a disservice, Mo. Wonder what went through his head after he felt the initial twinge in his neck. Did he even have time to process the sound? Just the pain and darkness? It's pretty morbid, but knowing people's final thoughts is always fascinating to me, because everyone will eventually have one. Do we know in that moment it is the last thing we are going to see? Really intrigues me. Even if his heart stopped immediately, he probably had at minimum a few seconds of consciousness. Just enough to know how bad he fucked up before dying. He probably was too badly injured or in shock to realize he needed to just listen to the EMTs. This basically applies to all addictions. I can quit whenever I want, but then when you ask them to stop, they say they don't want to. Nope. Acceptance is the first step at it. Someone said there could be a person who doesn't have a drinking problem is challenged to stop, and doesn't because they're not actually addicted. I totally agree. I realized that the way I phrased this made it seem like a huge generalization of addiction, which I did not intend, which is why I had the qualifier basically. Perhaps a better phrasing would be this applies to a lot of cases of addiction, but not all of them. There are always different cases, like the other person who replied to me about how he stopped smoking weed. Sorry that my phrasing was so absolute. I just think denial is a common thing overall. Work at a college. We kept getting angry letter from a dad of a student saying his daughter told him that we refused to issue tuition receipts he needed for his income tax. We told him she dropped out partway through first semester, and we had not seen her since. He assured us she had completed almost all the coursework and had even done 2 placements. He refused to believe what we told him and got angrier and angrier. By the way, his daughter's email name was Sweet Little Princess 316, and so on. Finally, the dean told him he refused to discuss the situation with the dad over the phone, but would meet with him anytime, as long as the dad showed up with the daughter. Dad then told us that the daughter refused as we had been abusive to her, and she was afraid for her safety. Best case of denial I ever saw. My very Catholic grandparents refused to believe my uncle, the youngest of their 6 kids, is gay. He's an extremely successful attorney that relocated to London from the US. I'm sure to live the life he wanted away from my in denial grandparents. They still insist his partner of 22 years is just his roommate, despite showing off professional style pictures of them in white robes and wedding rings. We all know, and he's not even trying to hide it anymore. But my grandparents still won't admit they have a gay son. You can't help your mom. She's destroying herself. There's nothing anyone can do to stop someone from wrecking their own life. If you can move, do it. That house is no place for a 2-year-old kid. Yeah, I get it, you want to study, but going to college is going to take a couple of years, and there's no telling how much worse your mom's addiction is going to get years down the line. If I was in your position, I'd be considering moving out of there. Not an easy call to make, and there's no good choice here, only 2 differently bad ones. But please give it some thought or try to figure something out. Some people want so badly to be different and special. Once at my store, a woman asked for a book on Cherokee mysticism or something, and proudly told me she was 136 Cherokee. Lady, at this point, you're white. And have you noticed that everyone had an Indian princess for a great-great-grandmother? Never a regular Indian woman. Always a princess. Had a girl like that in high school as well. I told her that people were spreading rumors and saying she is pregnant. She told me they were ulcers. Except that ulcers are holes and don't make you look obviously pregnant. Our guess was she was just trying to wait out graduation. She looked to be about 5 to 6 months along when it began to be very obvious and not a question anymore. We only had 1 month left of school. There's a fairly expensive hipster bakery near where I live that specializes in pies. They're really great pies, though I think you can tell that the bakers behind the business are still learning how to scale their creations up for retail sale, how to make big batches of shelf-stable product for sale. The result is if you go into the shop for a single slice, you'll likely get a great piece of pie, but if you buy a whole pie, which have lower turnover, so it might have been sitting there longer, it's hit or miss if the bottom will be soggy. I had a coworker who bought a whole pie there once for a dinner party, and came back later to complain that the bottom was really soggy and hadn't held up at all, and the baker told him it was supposed to be that way, because apparently people with sophisticated tastes appreciate apple pies with gummy, undercooked, soggy bottoms. Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.